My name's Ian Dursley. I'm a member of the Cawood Castle Garth group, which functions as a subcommittee of the parish council, although there are a number of members who aren't actually parish councillors. The purpose of the group, which was set up a few years ago, is to look into the historical and archaeological significance of the Garth, and also to investigate the ecology to try to determine exactly what types of flora and fauna we have here. So, what does the word Garth actually mean?
Garth is sort of a derivation from garten or garden, and the feeling is that it was probably the garden of the castle. Well, the Garth is a scheduled ancient monument. It belongs to the parish council. They bought it to stop 90 houses being built on it. It's a large, about 12-acre open space in the middle of the village of Cawood. It's a unique piece of land. It's not been ploughed for, well, within living memory.
Since the Garth has not been subject to any intensive farming practices, parts of the turf may well date back to the 15th century, when the standing castle remains were first constructed, or even to the 12th century, when work on it first began.
Often what you find on kind of historic monuments is you do find the bits of embankments, sometimes bits of ancient lawns, sometimes areas around walls and around ha-has and around dikes and that kind of thing. We've actually got the original kind of sort of centuries old turf, and these areas are quite sort of conspicuous in that they have got, you know, a greater variety of wildflowers, and they've got species there that we generally tend to find, you know, mainly in old meadows that haven't been affected by modern farming practices.
As well as the diverse ecology on the surface of the Garth, the group has also been interested in the area's archaeology, hidden beneath the surface. So a group of villagers was encouraged to join forces with members of the archaeology department of York University to undertake a geophysical survey of the land.
We're taking a resistivity survey of parts of the Garth. An electrical current passed through the ground, and we measure how much it's diminished in passing through the ground. That shows the resistivity of the ground between the probes that we're moving about and the ones that are fixed in place. And some readings will be high, some will be low, and it's a contrast between those that will reveal any buried features such as ditches, walls in the ground. Taking readings along the grids that we've set out so that we know where it will be when we put it on the map.
30, so that's 28 metres.
28.3 is perfect. Excellent.
To build an even better picture of the Garth's archaeology, a variety of surveying techniques was employed, including a topographical survey, an earthworks survey and a magnetometry survey. The magnetometry survey was carried out using a special device called a gradiometer. It consists of 2 magnetometers, one at the base of the vertical leg and another half a metre above it. As you walk along, it automatically takes a reading every half metre. It records differences in the Earth's magnetic field caused by ancient excavations, as measured by the upper and lower magnetometers. It's an extremely sensitive piece of equipment, and the operators have to wear absolutely nothing that's magnetic or even metallic. The results of the resistivity and magnetometry surveys were presented by the archaeologists at a public meeting. During the presentation, they were able to show that the surveys had highlighted a number of archaeological anomalies under the surface of the Garth.
That horseshoe shape, which shows on the aerial photograph, it also shows on the resistivity, and it shows slightly in the topography. You can see the notches going in there on the edge of the new cut.
Villagers were shown areas of the Garth that may be of particular archaeological interest and may warrant further investigation. One way in which the area known as the New Cut could be studied further could be by means of core sampling. This is an excavation technique that requires only minimum disruption to the ground. The moles that have been living on the Garth for generations are one group of diggers that steadfastly refuses to comply with any restrictions on excavating, despite the site's status as a scheduled ancient monument. Although some see them as a pest, we decided to harness their energies. In order to encourage further community participation in the Garth project, the group invited children from the local primary school to an afternoon of molehill sifting to collect archaeological artefacts that the moles had brought to the surface. Then, at a later date, a group of experts went into the school to help wash and identify the many finds that the children had collected.
Some of them you'll find might be a bit muddier than some of the others, so you might need to squirt. What we do is try and do it quite carefully when we're doing archaeological objects, because sometimes they have loose parts.
You don't get your hands wet.
So that's as clean as it's going to be.
Do you think that's right?
That's the 2 surfaces over there and there. It's been broken off.
I think this is a bit of stone. It's orange.
There will be bits of stone, because when it comes out of the molehills it was very dirty, so it's quite often difficult to work out what it is. So if you're not sure, you always keep them if you're not sure, and then you can clean it up later and throw them away. First one is white. It's very hard, quite shiny. Yeah? Glass bead? What do you think?
Just a piece of jewellery.
Well, it looks like it could be off a necklace, yeah. Because it's not just like a marble. It's got a hole through the middle. That piece is probably, that of these is probably the oldest. That might be 17th century. That might be 17, so 16 something. Like the time of the English Civil War, when the castle here was under siege. That's going back a fair old time.
There is a great deal that you can tell about the past simply by using your eyes and using your brain and thinking about what we probably all see every day and just overlook or don't think twice about.
Although the Garth is fascinating in its own right, it's important to remember that it is, and always has been, an integral part of the village of Cawood.
You've got the nice oriel window there. Everything's as it should be in a sense. The strange thing that you would expect to approach that perhaps from down in that direction. You'd expect to have a good view of it and approach it and sort of be overawed by it long before you got to it. But here it does look as though the approach is actually through there. The church has been built on a piece of locally high ground, and that's what makes me think that this would be a likely place for the earliest settlement. And think how far we are now from the marketplace, and also how far we are from the moat over there. The key thing really is that we're looking at a settlement that's got more than one focus. We haven't got church next to green next to marketplace, which is what we might expect if it was a straightforward village. We've got the church and possibly the core of the early settlement on the local high ground down here. We've got what looks like a plantation by the Archbishop up at that end. And then we've got the manor, the Keysbury Manor over there next to Gill Green. I wouldn't be surprised though if we haven't just got 2 manors here, but parts of a third. We seem to have 3 different sort of focuses of interest around the village. We can see the remains of another pond, obviously now dry. Splurges of material down the side where the people have tried to fill it in, but essentially not much different from the one over there which has been maintained. And beyond this little ridge here, we've got the remains of another pond whose far side is in the undergrowth there. So we've got three regular rectangular ponds, presumably for keeping and managing fish, but also ornamental in function, and often surrounded by a larger moat, which is what we seem to have not just one of, but two of now.
What we're setting it up over is a little red peg hammered into the ground.
On one particularly wet day, English Heritage demonstrated a selection of surveying techniques, ranging from the high-tech to the traditional, to enable a group of residents to undertake detailed surveys of some of the Garth's earthworks.
Okay, it's 1.311.
Exactly.
So somebody remember that.
The way it works, you have to see at least 4 satellites in the sky to get a reasonable fix. Ideally it likes 5. At any one time there may be, I don't know, 9 or 10 satellites in the sort of in the sky in your sort of area.
If we were to do lots of surveying in here with GPS, we'd have enough points to do a similar thing to that topographic survey that you've got, where you've got everything defined by contours. Now what we're going to do is a similar process but using tape measures and pencil. For instance, we know this tape here is 20 metres from that peg to that peg, and I've measured out here, that's equal to 2 centimetres, you see, on the plot, so that gives us our check. This way it's 15.7 metres, which is equal to 1.5 and a little bit on here, which is what we've got.
That's pretty technical, 1.5 and a little bit.
Well, you know, that's the way it goes.
That is a Popeye, and what it is 2 prisms, one above the other. The top prism looks in this direction to the right, the bottom prism looks in this direction to the left, and in between the two is a very small gap where there's no prism at all. That just looks through this little window on the opposite side. So by looking into this, and this takes some practice, you can look in 3 directions simultaneously, looking right, left and straight ahead. Now for distances of up to about 100 metres, this is a very good way of getting a right angle. At this end here, on our dog bin, bring this back to our baseline here, and now all I have to do to find out a right angle accurately is to swing this tape back and forth until that's the shortest possible distance, and at that point I have a right angle. If you do this with 2 people and without a Popeye, you've got someone at the far end who can say left a bit or right a bit until it looks like a decent right angle.
If you did it from that end to here, then you'd have your shortest point again though, wouldn't you?
That's true, but I'd waste a lot of time going back and forth.
The next day, Al Oswald of English Heritage reported back on the surveying. The full findings are included in an official English Heritage report.
Yes, we've got all 3 of those fish ponds marked on this map.
Cawood's past includes famous historical characters such as Edward I, Cardinal Wolsey and many other archbishops of York. Against such a grand historical backdrop, it's sometimes easy to overlook some of the area's smaller, less obvious, but no less interesting inhabitants. The Cawood Castle Garth group is currently devising a nature trail on the Garth and will be producing a nature trail leaflet to accompany it. The pond in the centre of the Garth is one of its most important features. The presence in it of a colony of great crested newts, an endangered species, was very significant in the protection of the Garth from development in the 1980s. In an initial survey, ecologist Martin Hammond confirmed that there is a healthy breeding population of great crested and smooth newts living in the pond. He was invited back to undertake a more detailed ecological survey.
The pond is really, really interesting, I mean, for two reasons. One is it's just a really good pond. It's got a lovely kind of, although you might think it looks like choked vegetation and overgrown, it's got a nice mixture of vegetation. It's got emergent plants that are growing up out of the water. It's got submerged vegetation, floating leaf vegetation. It's got lots of, there's kind of sort of multi-layered vegetation of small rushes and small herbs around the water margin. And that provides excellent habitat, you know, particularly for lots of different invertebrates. And I did this, one of the things I specialise in is freshwater invertebrates, and so I took some samples of what was in there, and it really is quite impressive. I mean, nothing absolutely extraordinary, but I mean, a very good, you know, a good quality pond. No particular problems with water quality there, no obvious, you know, indication that there's any extraneous pollution and so on of it, and just a good diversity of species there, including quite a few things that are not rare but are quite local, you know, that tend to be restricted to better quality ponds, that tend to be restricted to ponds that have got this nice kind of rich vegetation structure and so on. So you've got a real asset there.
What we're hoping to do here is to encourage the development of a wild flower meadow, but if possible we want to avoid actually importing plants from other areas that may not have grown here naturally otherwise. It's likely that the cutting regime used on the Garth, which involves simply cutting the grass and leaving it to rot down on the surface, has swamped the indigenous wild plants. We hope that by cutting and raking this area by hand, we will encourage these species to flourish once again, so that we can enjoy them in the way that they were enjoyed by previous generations of villagers. So among the improvements that we're going to introduce are improvements to access to the area. This is also in part to comply with the requirements of the Disability Discrimination Act. So what we're going to do is we're going to improve the pathways, but in a way that blends in with the surroundings, and we're also going to build a bridge across this dip. And in that way we hope to be able to improve access to the area for all the citizens of the village for generations to come.